Hello listeners, it's Mark here with another look round one of the clubs on our trip round all the sides through this off-season, and we've got round to the London Broncos, who are back in Super League for 2019. We've got one of our old friends from back in the day when the Broncos were in Super League before, which is at Gatward Ian on Twitter. You might know him as, but it's Ian Gatward. Just swap it around and you get the man, and he's going to look back at 2018 and kind of a few of the things that the Broncos were putting in place building up to 2018, and then we'll have a look ahead to 2019 as well. So to talk about the London Broncos 2018 season, we've got one of the people who've been listening to the show for a long time will recognise Ian Gatward's name and probably his voice from the earlier series when the London Broncos were back in Super League, and now we have them again. So welcome to the show, Ian.
Thank you. Good to be back on your show. Always a good listen to.
Yeah, so before the season started, 3% of our listeners predicted that London would get promoted. I'm going to guess that you were probably within the count that went for that, being the optimist that you often are, Ian.
I think, if I'm totally honest, at the start of the season, I guess we'd have another good season. Obviously, the loss of Henderson to Warrington, you could see it coming, without a doubt. But with Danny taking over the reins, I could see us having a good season. I obviously didn't think that we'd go as low as certain Mr. Schofield's prediction of 10th, which I think sort of like. Sorry?
That was absurd, wasn't it, really?
I think I could see where he was coming from, if I'm honest. The fact being that we lost Andrew to Warrington, new coach. I think the 10th was obviously totally absurd, but I guess we would be hovering around the top four because the championship has now really increased in strength year by year. And you look at the teams from last year, which was Toronto, Lee, Halifax, who are a very, very good side. Us, of course, and then Toulouse, you had Featherstone, Toulouse. So the championship, in some ways, was becoming a bit of a stronger league to compete in than the Super League, if I'm honest. And to actually get into the top four was certainly a mean achievement.
The final result of the season being second in the championship, and then of course the £1 million game winners, which we'll build a bit towards. We had the views in of a couple of other fans from the Broncos as well, so I'll cover those off, and then we'll sort of run through your memories of the season. So Aaron Smith said, making the £1 million game has been progress for the London Broncos, win or lose, so would have been happy either way. This progression has built gradually over the past 3 years on solid foundations based around experienced players and local talent coming through the London Rugby League leads, the Namco Origin Series, and then the Broncos Scholarship and Academy Programme. Much better this way than the boom and bust approach of other clubs. And Paul Chamberlain said, a season of perfect randomness leading to Super League, even if I'm unsure this is what the club needs. From being 20-12 down to Toulouse with 8 minutes left, the Widnes drop goal, winning the £1 million game with 4 points, luck was with us. However, 6 local players played in the £1 million game with more playing during the season, and Bionic and Davies moving on to Super League clubs. For me, that is the real legacy of this season. So both are talking about the youth coming through. So I'm sure that'll be a theme as we go along, because even even some of the players that came back into the squad in the last year or 2 years have been local products as well, who might have drifted away and come back, people like Channing and like Dixon. So it's been a very London themed squad, hasn't it? That took you into 2018.
Absolutely. And I think this, if you remember when we first met at the first Summer Bash series.
Back in 2015.
And at that time, Joey Greener was in charge of London. They were winning games, but really just scraping through. And I think, I don't know, I mean, at that time, I think he left to go back to Australia. Andrew Henderson took over the reins. He obviously didn't like what he saw on the pitch. So he put himself on the pitch in the first game against Sheffield, and I firmly believe that where London are now, that game, I think, started to where we are now. I really genuinely do, because Andrew Henderson saw what the issues were at the club, i.e. they were playing at a ground in which basically they weren't welcome.
Right, yeah.
He could see the problems at the club, i.e. you've got the first team training at one area, you've got the juniors training and playing at another area. So the club was like all over the place. So between him and David Hughes, they recognised that there was that ground at Ealing, which has a 4G pitch. It has all the gym under one roof. So you could get everybody under one roof. So that you now got games where you've got the academy playing before the first team. They can train together. And I really do believe that the £1 million game is a culmination of the planning ahead by Andrew Henderson and, of course, David Hughes. Because, as David Hughes has said, you can't. It's no good splashing money willy-nilly when the results aren't likely to be there. So you really do have to look within the catchment area, i.e. the London and South East. And you do have good junior kids coming through from mainly rugby union clubs who fancy giving it a go. And like the person said, you've got players who are growing up with the club who are suddenly being recognised by other Super League sides and moving on to them. Like you said, Bieniek, Matt Davis at Warrington.
Yeah, and so previously, all the other talent. I mean, Mike McMeekan's gone on to play for England. Dan Sargentson's gone on to play for England. These are trophy-winning players.
These are trophy-winning players. So there is talent in the London area, and I think this whole idea of actually now playing under one roof on one pitch. Okay, this was before with previous players. We never had that, but we're now getting players in the local area who can now see that London Broncos are in Super League, and who knows who else is out there.
And even if they weren't in Super League, there was a progression there, and I think you've mentioned Hughes and Henderson, who got that journey started from the year after relegation all the way through to being promoted back. But I suppose Ward and Langley were involved in those young players that have come through and that now make up a big percentage of the first team squad. So I suppose that brings us to 2018, doesn't it? Where Danny Ward got to take the reins, and everyone was maybe expecting a bit of a dip after Henderson was so successful, but it wasn't to be, especially with the start of the season this year. 6 wins in a row, and over 40 points were scored in 5 of those 6 games. So London really were the entertainers.
Absolutely, and the good thing about it was when the going did get tough, and there were times in which I think we were wondering, were we not going to make the top 4? And I think towards the end, it certainly became a bit of a cup final each game.
Yeah, definitely. You'd won those big games, hadn't you? And then you started playing more of the other top 4 competitors, and you lost to games like Toulouse, Lee, and Halifax. So were you then worried that the team would slip just below the top 4?
It's like I said, when you go into the start of the season, when you knew that the Championship was a tough division to get out of in the first place, and I think we're all realistic that the squad sometimes doesn't look big enough to compete, and it's like, there were times in which the wins were goddamn ugly, but at the end of the day, 2 points is 2 points. It doesn't matter how you perform. It's getting the win. And towards the end of the season, in fact, I was only talking to somebody the other day. I remember when we played Lee at home. It was a narrow-strome game, and I think we only lost by 6. And I felt at that time, coming away from that was another opportunity that we let slip. Because I think there were games during the season where I felt that we could and should have won, but it was just really like disappointing errors that let the matches go, and you do feel then that maybe top four was not going to be our year.
And that had probably been a similar theme to like the year before, and even the year when London were in the qualifiers. They got into winning positions in matches and lost them against the other teams that were competing with them. In 2018, so many times we saw London have big wins over the lesser teams, the bottom six teams, and then tough games with the top six teams. But it was that run of, like you say, cup games almost that came at the end of the regular season this year.
Well, I think
starting with the draw at Toulouse, maybe.
Could be, but again, if you are some fans from there, we could and should have won that game with possibly a drop goal, But at the end of the day, it's it's the final score that matters. But I think the problem is at times with the Championship is when you do play the bottom six, and you suddenly find that you're winning by, no disrespect to them, by 50, 60 points. I mean, I remember the time when we had to beat Barrow, was it by 30 odd points or something like that?
Of course, right.
Like that. And ever being the London fan, there's always that sense of pessimism about it. But obviously we shoved about 70 odd points past them, and so I got to second convincingly. But the difference between the bottom six and the top six in the Championship was the fact being that you could get part of the points on the bottom, which again the points difference helped us in the end
massively.
And obviously the top six, it was obviously just getting the win or getting the points, no matter how you achieve them.
What's it like watching those sorts of games? Because obviously there's a one-way traffic in the games against the lesser teams, with like often 60, 70 points being scored, and then against teams like Halifax and Featherstone, you'd play out really close competitive games that you'd maybe at the end of the year this year, luckily, just got over the line and push you into that second place. What's kind of the matchday experience like when you go from that to a tight game?
All right. I mean, the weird thing is that when you do come against the bottom six sides, and it's almost like when you watch them, you almost sense a fear that they know they should win by 50 to 60 points, and they try and push it. So it's almost like they're trying too hard to put the points on them. Once they get themselves into a good, clear, for the determination of the opponents who never give up, and fair play to them. But you just sense it. You do get the sense it's men against boys out there. And again, that's no disrespect to the opposition.
No, and I don't think anyone would think you were disrespecting the other sides. But I suppose that may be why a lot of London fans gave the team this reputation this year, that they made a lot of mistakes, because if they were going into games kind of against teams they knew they were going to beat, then maybe they did try something. But you got to the qualifiers, so that must be absolutely delighting for you. And then into the qualifiers, the first game of the qualifiers was London at Widnes, which was possibly the most winnable Super League team that you were going to come up against away in round one, and it was won with that Jared Samet last minute drop goal. How did that feel as a London fan, to see them back in the big time, almost beating a Super League side?
Well, I think the problem is you get to a point when you look at the previous season where you came up against other Super League sides. Don't forget we beat Salford. I think it was the year before.
Yeah, 2016. Yeah,
exactly. So you do know that if you're on a roll, to me, the pressure's on the opposition, the pressure's on the Super League side, because they're the ones that's expected to be a Championship side. So at Widnes, I mean, the funny thing was I was working in Manchester that evening. So while everybody was working, I had my Sky go on my phone, and I must admit it was it was horrible to watch at some point, because you felt, again, being a London fan, you think it almost felt like you felt, well, we're really playing really well, and you